She was cast out, marked barren. But years later, she returned with a child the stars themselves seemed to fear, and every empire was ready to kill for. The crystal citadel of Valoria rose above the shifting mists like a crown of light. Each spire shimmered with living crystal that pulsed to the rhythm of the celestial spark, the divine energy said to run in the blood of every true heir to the throne. Princess Kalira had grown up walking those luminous halls beneath ceilings carved with constellations older than her empire. But she walked them now in silence, her steps hollow against the glass floors. Her worth had always been measured in the promise of children who would inherit the spark. Yet the priest had tested her again and found nothing. No glow in her veins, no pulse in her spirit, no destiny. The court no longer tried to hide its whispers. The ministers met in corners, their robes whispering against the stone as they debated who would take her place. The people did not look at her with reverence anymore, only pity. And pity was deadlier than hatred. The royal council summoned her at dusk. The great chamber smelled of incense and fear. The archminister announced her exile in the same voice he used to declare festivals. His eyes did not meet hers. "You will leave for the moon of Droska at first light," he said. "You will not return. The barren moon." They called it that because nothing grew there, no trees, no flowers, no people. Only the wind, screaming through canyons of dead stone. A place to bury the living without a grave. Kalira did not beg. She had learned long ago that begging made the powerful smile. Instead, she bowed and accepted the sentence. Her hands trembled only once, when the ceremonial crown was lifted from her head. The weight gone from her skull felt like a wound. As she left the chamber, she could hear the laughter of the courtiers, laughter that cut deeper than any blade. In a palace where words could kill, laughter was the sharpest blade. That night, the sky over Valoria burned with the pale green light of the moons. The city slept in tiers of crystal towers, all humming faintly as if the empire itself dreamed. Kalira walked alone to the private gardens one last time. The silver fountains poured light instead of water, casting shifting patterns across the marble paths. She thought of the life she would have on Droska, endless days of gray stone and wind, and the knowledge that the world had forgotten her. She was turning to leave when she saw the cloaked figure, half hidden in the shadow of the great lunar tree. The figure moved with deliberate slowness, as if every step was weighed. The hood was pulled low, hiding the face, the hands gloved in black cloth. As Kalira froze, the figure came closer, and in a voice like the echo of a deep cavern, whispered her name. Princess Kalira. From beneath the folds of the cloak came a silver shard. It was not metal, not crystal, something older, a fragment of a shape she could not understand yet. Its surface rippled like water, though it was solid. The figure pressed it into her palm. The touch burned, but did not harm, as if the shard were tasting her. Then the whisper came. "When the stars turn red, you will understand." She wanted to speak, to ask who they were, to demand answers. But the figure stepped back, and the garden shadows swallowed them whole. The shard pulsed once, like a heartbeat, and then lay still in her hand. At dawn, the guards escorted her to the skyport. The citadel loomed behind her, lit by the first pale light of the sun. The people did not come to see her off. No one wept. No one waved. The ship that would carry her to Droska was small and unadorned, a vessel for forgotten exiles. The captain avoided her gaze. She took her seat and felt the shard warm again against her skin. As the ship rose through the atmosphere, she looked down at the shining world she had called home, its oceans like molten sapphire, its lands glimmering under the dawn. She tried to imagine never seeing it again and failed. The shard seemed to pulse faster with every mile between her and the surface. She wondered if the cloaked figure was still in the gardens, watching her go. The void beyond Valoria opened before her, black and endless. The stars glittered in patterns she had known since childhood, but tonight they seemed sharper, brighter, hungrier. She felt the weight of exile settle over her like chains. She told herself she would survive Droska. No matter how barren, no matter how silent, she would survive. In the corner of her mind, the whisper from the garden replayed, "When the stars turn red, you will understand." She had no idea what it meant. No prophecy had ever spoken of such a sign. The priests guarded the star records with zeal, and nothing in them spoke of red stars, unless it was knowledge too dangerous to keep in the open. By the time Droska rose before her, a scar ball of gray rock, she had made a decision. She would not be broken. She would keep the shard. She would wait. And when the stars turned red, she would be ready. The moon of Droska was a graveyard carved in stone, a place where the wind never slept and the dust never settled. Kelira stepped from the landing craft into a silence so deep it pressed against her skin. The horizon was jagged with broken towers, their surfaces eaten by centuries of storms. No birds, no plants, only the grinding voice of the wind. The guards left without ceremony. The ship lifted away, and the sky closed over her. Her shelter was an abandoned mining station, a cluster of metal shells half buried in the gray earth. The walls rattled with every gust. She spent the first weeks rationing supplies and exploring the nearest ruins. The land was littered with skeletons of machines, their limbs frozen in gestures of forgotten work. Some were humanoid, others shaped like insects or serpents. All of them shattered. In the deepest canyons, she found the remnants of temples, their walls carved with spirals and symbols unlike any known script. The priest had taught her 100 tongues, but none of them matched these markings. The locals called them the work of the Iraq, a race said to have died out before the first human empire was born. Their ruins have been declared cursed, but curses meant nothing to someone already condemned. Days turned into months, and months into years. Kelira learned the paths of the storms. She learned which towers still held rooms intact, and which caves led to water. She mapped the surface in her mind and marked each location where the Iraq script appeared. The shard she carried never left her skin, its surface often warm when she stood before the inscriptions, as if it recognized them. In the third year, she found the observatory. It stood on a ridge overlooking a canyon floor cracked into geometric patterns. The dome was split, but the machinery within remained in strange preservation. The main console was a circle of black stone, inlaid with veins of faintly glowing crystal. She brushed away the dust and felt the shard heat against her palm. Night fell fast on Droska. The stars appeared sharp as blades. The wind died for the first time in weeks, leaving a stillness that felt unnatural. Kelira placed the shard into the hollow at the center of the console. The crystal veins flared with light. The walls came alive with shifting constellations, the stars moving not as they were, but as they had been long ago. Lines of alien text scrolled across the floor. She could not read them, but the symbols felt familiar in her bones. The constellations shifted again until they formed a single pattern, a spiral of red points surrounding a central void. In the void, a single coordinate burned into the air. The shard pulsed in time with her heartbeat. She stepped back, her mind racing. She had seen maps before, of her own empire, of the outer reaches of the known galaxy. This was neither. It was older. The coordinate lay beyond the edge of all recorded charts. In the center of the projection, an image bloomed, a structure half temple, half living creature. Its spires curled like bone, its walls flowing like muscle beneath stone. She felt the name before she heard it in her mind. The Vault of Renewal. The air grew warmer, as if the observatory itself breathed. The image shifted to show rivers of light pouring from the vault and weaving themselves into shapes. People, beasts, trees, all things alive. The legends had spoken of a source from which all bloodlines had come, a place where the first spark of life was born and shaped, but it had always been dismissed as myth. Kelira felt the ground beneath her hum. The shard's surface rippled again, revealing a faint pattern of spirals identical to the Iraq carvings. The coordinates glowed brighter until they etched themselves into her vision. She knew she would never forget them. The light faded. The wind returned with a low moan, sweeping through the broken dome. The stars outside shone in their normal patterns, but Kelira no longer looked at them the same. The red spiral haunted her sight. She gathered her pack and the shard, her heart pounding. She had lived in exile, believing Droska was the end of her story. But now she knew it was only the threshold. The Empire thought exile meant death. Yet here, in the dust of dead worlds, the dead had whispered a secret to her, a path to a place that might change everything. And deep in her chest, the ember of defiance she had carried since leaving Valoria flared into flame. She would find the vault of renewal, no matter what lay between her and the coordinates, no matter who tried to stop her. The journey to the coordinates burned itself into Kilira's body. The storms of Droska gave way to the black sea between worlds. Her stolen freighter creaked under the weight of every jump. Each stop brought scavenger markets and silent trade posts, where her shard drew stares from those who pretended not to see. Her path wound through dead sectors where no Empire flags flew, and the stars hung cold and patient. At last, the spiral of red lights appeared in her viewports. It was not a constellation, but a vast field of nebulae coiled around a singularity. The heart of the spiral was dark, yet alive, a presence without sound. The vault of renewal hung there, as the image from the observatory had promised. Its spires curved like the bones of a creature too large to imagine, its walls shimmering as though stone and flesh were the same. Her vessel drifted closer, drawn by a force that was neither gravity nor magnetism. The gates were taller than cities, carved with the same spirals she had traced in Droska's dust. As she approached the surface, the shard in her hand throbbed, and the gates began to move without sound. Two massive panels slid apart, revealing a corridor lit from within by the soft glow of flowing light. Kilira stepped from her ship. The floor beneath her was warm and seemed to pulse in time with her own heartbeat. The air held no scent, no weight, yet each breath filled her with an almost dizzying clarity. She walked down the corridor until it widened into a chamber vast enough to hold mountain. In the center ran a river of light, liquid yet not liquid. Its surface swirled with colors that shifted faster than the eye could follow. Within it, shapes formed and dissolved. Faces of creatures she recognized and others she could not. Trees, cities, oceans. Each image lasted a breath before becoming something else. The river sang without words, and the sound bypassed her ears to settle directly into her mind. The gates sealed behind her. A voice rose from the river. It was not male or female, not old or young. It simply was. It spoke her name, not as others did, but as though it had known her before she existed. "You are not a failure," it said. "You are a vessel, locked until the time was right." Kilira's knees weakened. The court had called her empty, yet here the emptiness was revealed as purpose. She asked what the river was. The answer came in waves. This is the origin of all lines. All blood. All breath. The first spark of life was drawn here, and from here all things were shaped. The river rose into the air, curling around her like a living thread. Images bloomed in its surface. Children with eyes like stars, creatures that could breathe in any sky, civilizations that might have been and might yet be. The voice spoke again. "You may take from the river and conceive a life unbound by the limits of any race. No disease, no decay, no chains of time." Her heart pounded with the pull of it. But the voice shifted, dark. "Every gift costs everything. To accept, you must give yourself to the shaping. Your fate will bind to the child. The child will bind to all who live and all who will live. If they rise, you rise. If they fall, you fall." The light pressed against her skin, warm and aching. It showed her a child's face, not yet born, a child whose gaze carried the weight of countless futures. Her own reflection rippled there, altered, her eyes brighter, her skin threaded with faint light. She understood without words that she would be remade. Kilira's hands shook. She thought of the cold halls of the crystal citadel, of the laughter that had followed her since her first breath. She thought of the nights alone on Droska, staring at the stars and wondering why she still lived. And she thought of the gates that had opened for her alone. The voice waited, patient and endless. Around her, the river's images began to slow, as if holding its breath. The chamber's glow dimmed until only the current shone. She stood at the edge, her choice heavy as the silence. She knew that to turn away would mean leaving this place forever. To step forward would mean binding herself to the destiny of every sentient being. The shard in her hand dissolved into the river. The warmth surged through her feet into her blood. She realized the vault was not just a place, it was alive, and it had been waiting for her. She closed her eyes and let the light take her. The gates of the crystal citadel had not opened for her in years. The streets beyond were lined with banners for a festival she had not been invited to. The air shimmered with heat and song, but the sound faded as the crowd saw her. Veiled in black, she walked with steady steps. The robe could not hide the curve of her belly. Whispers began as murmurs, then sharpened into gasps. Her name moved through the air like the flight of a blade, Kilira, the princess who had returned from exile. The womb they called empty, carrying life. The palace guards hesitated at the sight of her. No one had told them what to do if she came back alive. She passed them without a word. Her feet knew the path, though the years had changed the corridors. The throne hall doors opened, not with ceremony, but with the weight of silence. The royal court turned as one, faces pale, jewels glinting in the half-light. The king, her father, sat forward, his eyes narrowing. Priests in their silver veils rose, clutching their talismans. One spoke in a voice too loud for the stillness. "This is not a blessing. This is defiance. This is blasphemy." Kilira stood at the center of the hall. The veil over her face shifted with her breath. She met no one's gaze, and yet no one could look away. Beneath the fabric, her lips curved in a faint, unreadable line. Rumors had been waiting for her long before she stepped through the gates. They spilled now like water from a cracked vessel. She had bargained with the star gods. She had stolen a soul from the underworld. She carried a weapon disguised as flesh. Others whispered she carried no child at all, but an egg, a seed, an alien parasite. The stories tangled together, feeding on the fear in the room. None knew the truth. The child's heartbeat pulsed within her, not only in her body, but in the walls, the floor, the very air. It resonated with the frequency of the celestial spark, the birthright of the royal line. But it was stronger, more intricate. Threads of power laced through it, carrying echoes of the vault's living light. The king rose from his throne, his voice heavy with both fury and doubt. "Tell me whose life you carry. Tell me what you have brought into my house." She answered only by lifting her hands to the veil. Slowly, she drew it back. Her face was thinner, her eyes brighter than any remembered. There was a quietness to her that spoke of storms weathered in silence. No one saw her move, but the nearest priest stumbled back, clutching his chest as though the heartbeat had struck him. A shiver passed through the court as the sound filled the hall, not with volume, but with weight. It was not the beat of an unborn child alone. It was the echo of countless generations. It was the memory of creation itself. The king's eyes flickered with something she could not read. In that moment, she knew he felt it too, though he would never speak it aloud. The child was not his heir. The child was something more. That night, the palace was a cage of light and shadow. Priests debated in whispers behind closed doors. Counselors weighed the danger of letting her live and the greater danger of trying to end her. Assassins sharpened blades in chambers beneath the city. In the upper towers, Kilira stood at a balcony, watching the stars shift in slow arcs. The child stirred within her, and for an instant she felt not movement but thought. A single word formed in her mind, not in any language she knew. Yet its meaning was clear: wait. She turned from the night and lay down upon the bed that had once been hers. Long into the hours, she listened to the palace breathe. Around her, the world was moving towards something vast and inevitable. The court could call it blasphemy. They could call it treason. But none could stop the moment when the heartbeat would become a voice. Somewhere deep in the stone of the citadel, the rhythm continued to spread. Down into the catacombs, out through the streets, across the hills and rivers to the farthest edge of the realm. It moved through the sky and beyond, into the silent paths between stars. And in places Kilira had never seen, beings paused in their work, their travel, their war, and felt it too. The child was not yet born. Yet already, the galaxy knew its coming. The first fleet appeared above Valoria at dawn. The ships hung in silence, their hulls catching the light of the twin suns like shards of ice. The banners they bore were not of conquest, but of warning. Their leaders demanded audience with the king and the council, but every word they spoke was aimed at Kilira. The message spread faster than any starship could travel. Empires feared the child's birth more than they feared extinction itself. Some believed the heartbeat within her was a weapon, a force that could destroy worlds with a thought. Others believed it was the key to uniting the galaxy under a single will. Neither side intended to wait until the truth revealed itself. Fleets shifted allegiances overnight. Allies became enemies in the span of a whisper. Treaties signed in blood were burned in the light of the next morning. New pacts were sworn in the shadows between the stars. The galaxy was no longer a map of borders. It was a storm drawn tight around the small room where Kilira slept. Inside the palace, the air was thick with plotting. Assassins slipped through corridors, their faces hidden in hoods of night. Some were sent by rivals seeking to end the line before it began. Others came from those who claimed to want to save the child by taking it far from her arms. Each shadow moved with the same intent, to reach her before the others did. Religious sects rose from the ashes of forgotten temples. They offered their armies to guard her, in exchange for the right to raise the child themselves. They called it the Starborn and swore it would lead them to an age where death itself was a choice. Entire planets pledged themselves to her cause without her ever asking. Entire others promised destruction if the child were allowed to live. The king sealed the citadel, but Kilira knew walls meant little against what hunted her. She could feel their intentions pressing against her mind like a cold wind. It was not only her body they sought, it was the idea of the child, the belief that whoever held it would hold the future in their grip. Her nights were no longer her own. In sleep, she walked paths that did not yet exist. She saw visions of the future unbound. Some were radiant with peace. Cities rose on worlds once abandoned. Species once at war shared their skies with open hands. In these visions, the child was grown, its face shifting between forms, its voice speaking in tones that carried no threat, yet held unshakable authority. Other dreams were drowned in endless war. Fleets clashed in the dark between stars until the void itself bled. Fire fell on the crystal cities of 1,000 worlds. The child's power bent the fabric of reality until nothing was certain and nothing could be trusted. In these futures, her daughter's eyes were as cold as the void, and her hands shaped only destruction. Kilira awoke from each dream with her heart a drumbeat in her chest. She could not tell if the visions were warnings or promises. Perhaps they were both. In the council chamber, the arguments never stopped. Some demanded she be moved to a secure fortress deep within the moons. Others wanted her sent beyond the empire to a place where neither ally nor enemy could reach her. The king listened to all and decided nothing. His eyes followed her whenever she entered the room, but his silence held more questions than she could answer. Outside the palace gates, the people had begun to gather. They carried offerings and prayers and banners, painted with the image of a star cradled in a woman's hands. They sang songs older than the empire and whispered blessings older still. But among them moved others whose eyes were knives, waiting for the chance to strike. The first attack came under the cover of celebration. A procession was called in honor of the king's coronation anniversary. The streets bloomed with light and petals. Kilira was ordered to appear on the high balcony with the rest of the royal family. She knew it was a mistake. The air felt wrong. The shadows, too deep. Halfway through the speeches, the first shot rang out. A guard beside her fell without a sound. Then another. The crowd below broke into screams as figures in black surged forward. The guards closed around her, but the attackers moved with precision. Each one aimed not at her head or heart, but at her stomach. The king's voice roared orders, but the sound barely cut through the chaos. Kilira felt herself being pulled backward, through the balcony doors, down the hidden stairwell, into the underpass beneath the citadel. The child within her was silent, yet she could feel a pulse like heat moving through her veins, as if it too understood the danger. When they emerged in the armory, she saw that the guard who had brought her, there was no guard at all. He removed his helm, and Kilira recognized him from her dreams. His face was younger there, but the eyes were the same. He spoke no name, only a single sentence. They will come again and again until there is nothing left of this world. He led her to a small vessel hidden in the shadow of the palace hangar. It bore no royal markings, only the scars of travel through dangerous skies. He told her it could take her to a place where the war had not yet reached, but it would not be safe forever. She hesitated, torn between the safety of the walls she knew and the danger of the void beyond. That night, she dreamed again. This time, the visions came in fragments, a child's hand touching a dying soldier and restoring life. A world torn apart, reknitting itself in moments. A fleet of ships bowing their weapons in surrender. A sky where the stars shifted into new constellations. But then, fire, blood, silence. The sound of the heartbeat, slowing. She woke before dawn and found the king waiting in her chamber. He told her the fleets above Aloria had multiplied. He told her that some bore banners of peace, but all carried weapons. He told her the council was split, and that even he could not guarantee her safety for another day. In his eyes, she saw something she had not seen before: fear. By midday, she stood on the launch platform. The vessel waited, its engines humming. The dream man stood beside it, watching her with no expression. Her veil hid her face, but she could feel the eyes of the court burning into her back. They did not know if she was leaving forever or returning with the power to undo them all. The ship lifted into the dark sky. The city fell away. The citadel's crystal spires caught the light one last time before they vanished beneath the clouds. Beyond the atmosphere, the fleets waited. Some moved aside. Others tracked her path like predators watching prey. She did not know which were allies and which were enemies. She suspected the truth was that there was no difference anymore. As the stars closed around her, the child stirred again, not in fear, but in a way that felt almost like recognition. Kilira's hand rested on her stomach, and for a moment she thought she felt the shape of a word rising in her mind. But before it formed, the ship shuddered and alarms began to sound. The war for the unborn had begun. The stars outside the vessel burned cold and distant as Kilira drifted through the silence of the void. The alarms had stopped, but the memory of their wail still echoed in her ears. She sat in the narrow cabin, her hands folded over the rise of her stomach. The child within was quiet, but she could feel its presence watching her from somewhere beyond. She had not heard the voice of the vault since the day she stepped out of its gates. But now, as the ship slid between the light of distant suns, it returned. The sound was not in her ears, but in her blood. It spoke with a weight that turned every thought heavy. One birth could save billions, or erase them without a trace. The words were not a riddle. They were a boundary. Beyond it lay only two paths. The first was to let the child be born free. Its power would awaken with the first breath. The ability to alter the DNA of entire civilizations would pass into the hands of someone who had not yet seen a single dawn. The second was to seal that power forever, locking it away before the child took its first breath. In doing so, she would ensure the galaxy's survival, but strip it of its salvation. Kilira stared into the dark beyond the glass. The choice was not for herself. It was for every species that had ever existed and for those that had not yet come into being. The weight of that truth pressed against her until she could hardly breathe. The voice spoke again, showing her visions that were not dreams, but living threads of possibility. In one thread, she saw her child walking among worlds that had been dying and bringing them back to life. Civilizations once reduced to dust were rebuilt. Species thought extinct returned to their skies. Entire empires laid down their weapons in awe of a being who could heal them without asking for anything in return. In another thread, the power was turned inward, not to heal, but to control. With a gesture, Her child reshaped the bodies of leaders until they bent to its will. Fleets were rebuilt not as ships of war, but as extensions of its own mind. The galaxy became a single thought, and every living being within it a part of that thought. No dissent, no freedom, only perfection in the eyes of the one who had chosen it. Kilira turned away from the visions, but they followed her. She could feel the threads touching her skin. The vault's voice whispered that once she chose, there would be no turning back. The vessel shuddered as it slipped past the edge of a debris field. The pilot, a man whose name she still did not know, kept his eyes on the shifting light of the controls. He spoke only once, saying that the fleets had not stopped tracking them. Some wanted her brought to their worlds for protection. Others wanted her destroyed before she could reach any place of safety. He did not ask her which she thought was worse. At night, she lay in the narrow bunk, staring at the metal ceiling and feeling the child shift within her. The movements were not random. They were patterns, almost words, almost choices. She began to wonder if the child already knew what was coming, if it had already decided. The next day, the voice of the vault returned with something new. It showed her a vision of a world she had never seen, a barren sphere of black stone wrapped in a shroud of red mist. In its center was a single pool of living light, like the river she had seen in the vault. The voice said this was the place where the decision would be made. It was where the power had first been born, and where it could be bound again if she wished. The pilot changed course without asking how she knew the way. The journey took them through uncharted systems, past the edges of maps known only to the oldest traders. They slipped between the carcasses of dead planets and the shadows of stars that had burned themselves to ash. When they reached the world of black stone, it was not empty. Fleets ringed it in silent orbit. Ships from every empire, every faith, every enemy and ally. She knew they were not here for the planet itself, but for her, and for the choice she carried within her blood. The pilot brought the vessel low, skimming the surface until they found a canyon wide enough to hide within. She walked alone to the pool of light. The air was heavy and still. The red mist above swirled without sound. The pool glowed with a pulse that matched her own heartbeat. The voice of the vault rose from its depths, telling her that this was the last moment before the threads became unbreakable. Kilira knelt at the edge of the pool and closed her eyes. She saw both futures again, but this time she also saw a third. It was a path where the power was neither sealed nor unleashed in full. Instead, it was scattered, broken into fragments so small that no one being could ever hold it entirely. In this path, the galaxy was spared the risk of total control, but denied the possibility of instant salvation. Each world would hold only a spark, and together they could shape their own fate without one voice to rule them all. The vault warned that this was the hardest path to walk. It would take lifetimes to see its worth. The galaxy would suffer longer, but perhaps endure longer as well. Kilira felt the child stir again. This time, the movement was stronger, more certain. She understood then that the choice was not hers alone. The child was aware. The child had been listening. She spoke aloud for the first time since she had left the Citadel. She told the child of the three paths. She told it of the hope and the danger. She told it the love she felt for a being she had not yet met. She told it that the choice belonged to both of them. The pool brightened as if answering. She felt warmth spread through her body and into the child. Then the light shifted, splintering into 1,000 shards that rose into the air. Each shard drifted upward, vanishing into the red mist above. The vault's voice faded, leaving only silence. When she opened her eyes, the pool was gone. The ground beneath her was dry and cold. The child within her was calm, as if it had just finished a great task. She knew then that the decision had been made. The power was no longer whole. It was scattered across the stars, beyond the reach of any one will. She returned to the vessel to find the pilot waiting. He asked her nothing. He only steered the ship away from the black stone world. The fleets in orbit began to move, but none fired upon them. Perhaps they did not yet understand what had happened. Perhaps they never would. As the stars spread out before them, Kilira placed her hand over her stomach. She did not know what kind of life awaited her child. She did not know if the scattered sparks would save the galaxy or doom it to a slower fall. But she knew the choice had been made with both their hearts, and that was enough. The war for control of her unborn child was over. But a new war was beginning, one fought not with fleets or weapons, but with the quiet power of 1,000 sparks waiting to be found. The air around the vault was heavy with silence, but above the black stone sky, the silence was shattered by the roar of battle. Fleets from 100 banners clashed in the thin orbit of the world. Each ship hurled fire and steel into the void, yet none dared to strike the surface. All knew that somewhere below, Kilira was bringing the child into the world, and all knew that whatever emerged from her womb could decide the fate of every star they fought under. Inside the canyon, Kilira knelt on a bed of smooth obsidian. Her body trembled with the waves of labor. Sweat rolled down her skin in the red light that seeped from the mist above. The vault's pool was gone, yet she felt its pulse in her veins, as if it had poured itself into her months ago and waited for this single moment. The first cry came before the child had fully entered the world. It tore through the air like the shattering of glass, and Kilira felt the vibration in her bones. That cry did not stay within the canyon. It raced outward as though sound had become light and light had become thought. It passed into the ground, into the sky, into the deep black between the stars. Above, the fleets faltered. Pilots gasped as alarms lit up their consoles. Not alarms of danger, but of impossible readings. Across the galaxy, ancient plagues that had defied healers for centuries began to vanish. Dying stars blazed back to life, sending flares of gold and white into their surrounding systems. On forgotten worlds, seeds that had been buried in dust for millennia began to split and sprout. The bones of extinct species shifted and rose, drawing breath once again. Kilira held the newborn close. The child's skin glowed faintly, as if the light of the vault had chosen a new vessel. The eyes opened, and Kilira froze. Within them, she saw not the gaze of a newborn, but the depth of one who had seen the turning of ages. The child blinked slowly, and it felt less like a reflex and more like acknowledgement, as though it knew why it had been brought into being. The ground beneath her shook as the battle above raged again. The brief pause of awe had passed, and now the fleets fought harder than before. Some sought to reach her. Others sought to destroy her before the child could grow into the fullness of its power. Kilira knew she could not stay. She wrapped the child in a strip of her own cloak and rose to her feet. Her body was weak, but her steps were steady. She moved deeper into the canyon, away from the open air. The sound of weapons above grew faint, replaced by the low hum of something older than the ships, and older than the vault itself. In a hollow beneath the black stone, she found what she had not known she was seeking, a door made not of metal or rock, but of woven light. It opened as she approached, spilling a warm glow into the shadow. She stepped inside and felt the air change. The hum faded, replaced by the steady beat of her own heart, and the smaller heartbeat pressed against her chest. The chamber beyond was vast and empty, save for a single pathway of light stretching into darkness. She walked until her steps echoed no more, and then stopped. She felt eyes upon her, though no figure stood before her. A voice spoke, not the voice of the vault, but something deeper. It asked no questions. It offered no guidance. It only said, "This is where you decide how they will find you." Kilira looked down at the child. The newborn's gaze was fixed on hers, and for a moment she felt as though they shared the same thought. She realized then that the power to alter the galaxy was not simply a gift or a weapon. It was a mirror, reflecting the will of its bearer. She pressed her lips to the child's forehead and whispered words that no one else would ever hear. Then she turned away from the light and walked into the darkness. The air closed around her, soft and cool. The path behind her vanished, and when she looked forward again, there was only the shape of an archway opening into another world. When Kilira stepped through, she was gone. Gone from the world of the vault, gone from the sight of the fleets and the reach of the hunters. Some said she had been taken by the gods. Others claimed she had fallen into the folds of time itself. The truth was that no one knew, and those who had sought her found only the empty canyon and the whisper of a cry still echoing in the stone. In the years that followed, the galaxy told and retold the story of the birth. Some worlds built temples to the child they called the Starborn Healer. Others called it the Seed of Doom and armed themselves for the day it would return. The truth of the choice Kilira had made at the vault remained hidden, only in the heart of the one who carried the burden of it.